This will be the story of how Texas wins their independence. So, backing up, Texas originally, and Mexico for that matter, was originally controlled by the Spanish. Mexico gains its independence, I think, around 1821. So, Texas is now a part of Mexico. Early on, there were very few people living there. Actually, that's a mistake. It says natives, it should say Tejanos. Tejanos are people that were living in Texas but were of Mexican descent. And then 1821, yeah. This is right after Mexico gets its independence from Spain. They begin to invite white American settlers to begin living in Texas. So they think of it as an invitation. They invite people to live in Texas. So the Americans that go over there, you have to remember, they're moving to a foreign country. Think of Texas as a province or a state of Mexico. And the first big group that went over there was led by a man named Stephen F. Austin. His last name should look familiar. Austin is now the capital of Texas, named after him. Anyway, as time goes on, more and more Americans go to Texas. And why were they going? This is the story of the West in the United States. They're going over there for land, cheap land to farm. And in many cases, a lot of these people are going to cotton farm. So it goes on for a few years, and suddenly the American government is not pleased with the arrival of all the new American settlers. And there were multiple reasons why. The first reason, religion. American settlers that were going over there were not Catholic like most Mexicans were, but they were Protestants instead. And the Mexican government wanted the Americans to convert to Catholicism. Second reason, we now start talking about slavery. The Americans that were going over into Mexico were slave owners. They were taking their slaves with them, but Mexico had banned slavery by this point in time. I think they did that in sometime in the 1820s. It doesn't matter. Slavery is illegal in Mexico, and American settlers are taking slaves there. Other issues, the Mexican government was wanting the Americans to learn Spanish, which they didn't. The Mexican government was wanting them to become Mexican citizens, which they had no interest in. Also, the Tejanos, the people of the Texans of Mexican descent, they were upset. The settlers were showing up. They were taking lots of tracts of land, and they were showing little respect for Mexican culture. So after a point, the Mexican government just gets fed up with the American settlers. So they ban American settlers from continuing to come into Texas. They don't kick out the ones living there. They just say no more Americans can enter, but Americans ignored this request and continue to go into Mexico. So you can think of these Americans now are illegal immigrants going into Mexico. Fast forward, 1836, the Americans or Texans, whatever we want to call them at this point, they're under the leadership of a man named Sam Houston. And you should recognize that last name because the city of Houston, Texas is named after him. Anyway, they declare their independence from Mexico. They say, we are breaking apart. We're not happy. The Mexican government obviously is not happy by all this. They're Sam Houston, and they respond with force. They call in the army. And the Mexican leader, he was the leader of the military and he was their president. His name was General Santa Anna, and he's going to go after the Texans slash Americans, and he goes after them at a place called the Alamo, which I think most of you have probably heard of before. Anyway, the Alamo today is in the city of San Antonio, and at the time it was technically a mission, which is kind of like a church. Think of it almost as a really small village. Like there was a church, and then they had around the whole settlement, they had a huge wall, and people lived in this mission. So it wasn't a town. It wasn't just a church. It was kind of like a compound, a walled-in compound. Anyway, the Americans, they're trapped in there. The Mexican army goes after them. Takes 12 days for them to get into the Alamo, and the outcome for the Americans was not good at all because all the Americans died. 186, I think, to be exact, including some famous people. Davy Crockett, he was like a famous frontiersman. Anyway, historians estimate that the Americans, before they all died, killed between 400 and 600 of Santa Anna's troops. Okay, and this is an old sketch of the Alamo. This is what it looks like today. You can still visit. I'm sure some people have been there before. And this, to me, it looks like as I'm going to assume this is the Mexican army over here, and they're crashing over the walls at the Alamo. Okay, so the Alamo, everyone dies, but the war is not over. Now Sam Houston, he's the commander of the Texan/American Army. He's going to attack Santa Ana. I think this is a few months later at a place called San Jacinto, and the battle became known as the Battle of San Jacinto. They attacked early in the morning. They surprised the Mexican army. Everyone, including Santa Ana, is asleep, and they absolutely demolish the Mexican army. I think the battle was over in like 12 or 16 minutes. So they win the battle and they take Santa Ana as prisoner. Now they have the Mexican president as a hostage. And I imagine it went down something like this. Well, we're either going to be our own independent thing or we're going to kill you. And Santa Ana doesn't want to die, so he agrees. And now Texas is its own independent thing because they want to become a state. They want to join the United States because the people that led this little revolution are Americans. But the North and South were arguing over whether they wanted Texas as a state. And you might be thinking, well, this is the time period during Manifest Destiny, and we wanted to add land. Well, it becomes a slavery issue because Texas, if added as a state, would become a slave state, and Northerners were extremely upset about this. We're entering into the time period where slavery is dividing the North and the South more and more. So there was debate about it. The next couple of presidents did not allow Texas to become a state because those presidents thought if they were added, it would split the country between North and South even more. The country would fall apart. So Texas officially, for about 10 years, was its own independent country, known as the Republic of Texas. And then finally in 1845, I'm pretty sure it was James Polk as president, and he's going to allow Texas to become a state. So what you need to do here is you need to take out your maps, add Texas. There's Texas. The what is Texas. The when is 1845. Put both of those on your map. And then obviously here's the how, the story we've just talked through. You don't have to add this to your map because you have it in your notes. And now flip that over, and now we add to the chart. Question is the same. Was the United States justified in how they got Texas? Justified means having good or fair reasons. So two things you'll do on the actual chart for Texas is your level of justification. I'll show you the scale. And then two sentences explain why you gave this event the number you did and whether the United States was justified in your opinion on how they got Texas. No right or wrong answers, just make a solid argument backing it up. And there is your justification scale.